Welcome to Certified Data Engineer Associate DEA-C01 Practice Exam Number 1. You'll get 30 exam-style questions. I will read each question, then give you a 10-second countdown to review the answer choices on screen. Feel free to pause the video if you need longer. After each countdown, I will reveal the correct answer and explanation. Question 1. Adatum Insurance has a data pipeline that uses AWS Glue ETL to process claims data from a JDBC source, Amazon RDS MySQL. The job processes incrementally using job bookmarks. The data engineer notices that the job is reprocessing records it has already processed, causing duplicate entries in the target S3 location. Which combination of actions should the data engineer take to resolve this issue? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are Option B and Option E. Glue job bookmarks require specific implementation details to function correctly. The job.init call at the beginning and job.commit call at the end of the script are essential for initializing and persisting bookmark state. If job.commit is missing, the bookmark state is never updated, causing the job to reprocess the same data on subsequent runs. The transformation CTX parameter associates bookmark state with each specific data source, enabling proper tracking when a job has multiple sources. Without unique transformation CTX values, bookmark state may not be correctly indexed. While a monotonically increasing bookmark key is important, it is a source schema requirement rather than a fix for reprocessing. Switching to paused mode would process new data but explicitly not update the bookmark state, which would perpetuate the issue. S3 event notifications do not apply to JDBC data sources. Question 2. Tailspin Healthcare has an AWS Glue ETL job that processes medical records from multiple S3 sources. The source data contains nested JSON structures with fields that sometimes appear as strings and sometimes as integers across different source files. The job fails with type mismatch errors when attempting to write to the target table. What should the data engineer use to resolve the type ambiguities? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is Option A. The Resolve Choice Transform is specifically designed to handle type ambiguities in dynamic frames. When a field appears as different types across records, such as string in some files and integer in others, Glue marks it as a choice type. The cast action courses all values to a single consistent type, resolving the mismatch before writing. Other resolve choice options include make struct, retain both types in a struct, make calls split into separate columns, and project keep one type and drop others. Relationalize flattens nested structures into relational tables, but does not resolve type ambiguities within individual fields. Converting to a Spark data frame loses the dynamic frame's ability to track choice types and requires manual schema definition. Glue crawlers detect schema, but do not enforce type consistency across files with varying field types. Question 3. Fabricam Analytics runs AWS Glue ETL jobs that read from a Glue data catalog table with over 2 million partitions stored in Amazon S3. The jobs filter on year, month, and day partition columns, but take over 20 minutes just to list partitions before any data processing begins. Which combination of optimizations reduces the partition listing time with the least operational overhead? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are Option A and Option B. Partition indexes in the Glue data catalog enable efficient server-side filtering of partitions without scanning the entire partition list. The catalog partition predicate parameter leverages these indexes by pushing partition filter expressions to the catalog service using JSQL parser syntax, dramatically reducing the number of partitions returned before Glue lists S3 files. Together, these features can reduce partition listing from minutes to seconds. Migrating to an external Hive metastore adds significant operational overhead for managing EMR infrastructure. Replacing crawlers with Lambda does not address the partition listing performance issue during ETL reads. Converting to Iceberg format would solve the problem, but requires rewriting all existing data and modifying all downstream queries, which is far more effort than enabling partition indexes and using server-side predicates. Question 4. A data engineer at Contoso Corp is migrating a large Oracle database to Amazon Aurora PostgreSQL using AWS DMS. Several tables contain lob columns with mixed sizes. Most lob values are under 10 KB, but approximately 5% exceed 100 KB. The engineer needs to maximize migration performance while ensuring no data is truncated. Which lob handling mode should the engineer configure for the DMS task? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Inline lob mode is a hybrid approach specifically designed for tables with mixed lob sizes where most values are small. Setting inline lob max size to 10 KB transfers the majority of lobs, those under 10 KB, inline with the row data for maximum performance, while larger lobs are transferred via a separate lookup operation ensuring no truncation. Full lob mode migrates all lobs via lookup regardless of size, resulting in significantly slower performance. Limited lob mode truncates any lob exceeding the configured size, risking data loss for lobs larger than the set limit. Using a separate task for large lobs adds unnecessary operational complexity compared to inline mode, which handles both scenarios in a single task. Question 5. Litware Automotive uses Amazon Data Firehose to deliver vehicle telemetry data to Amazon S3. The data must be partitioned by vehicle type and region extracted from the JSON payload. The team configures dynamic partitioning with JQ expressions, but discovers that the minimum buffer interval is 60 seconds instead of the expected 0 seconds. What explains this behavior? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. When dynamic partitioning is enabled on Amazon Data Firehose, the minimum buffer interval is 60 seconds. 0-second buffering, zero buffering mode, is only supported for S3 destinations without dynamic partitioning enabled. Dynamic partitioning uses JQ expressions or Lambda functions to extract partition keys from records and route them to different S3 prefixes, which inherently requires buffering to group records by partition key before writing. The buffer size range also changes to 64-128 MB when dynamic partitioning or format conversion (parquet/orc) is enabled. This is not related to when the delivery stream was created, as it is a fundamental constraint of the dynamic partitioning feature. JQ expression processing time is negligible and not the cause of the minimum interval. Cross-region delivery does not affect the buffer interval configuration. Question 6. A data engineer at Fabricam Healthcare needs to detect and handle sensitive patient data, PII/FI, stored in Amazon S3 buckets across their data lake. The solution must automatically identify sensitive data and trigger remediation workflows. Which combination of AWS services should the engineer use? Select 2, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. Amazon Macy uses machine learning to discover and classify sensitive data including PII and FI in S3 buckets. It supports both managed data identifiers, pre-built patterns for common sensitive data types, and custom data identifiers, regex patterns for organization-specific data. Macy publishes findings to Event Bridge, which can trigger automated remediation workflows such as Lambda functions to quarantine, encrypt, or notify about sensitive data. Macy identifies sensitive data but does not automatically redact it. Redaction must be handled by a separate remediation workflow. AWS config tracks resource configuration changes, but does not scan object contents for PII. Amazon Guard Duty is a threat detection service that monitors for malicious activity and unauthorized behavior, not a data classification tool for sensitive data patterns. Question 7. Tailspin Games operates an Amazon OpenSearch service domain for real-time game analytics. Historical gameplay logs older than 30 days are rarely queried, but must be retained for 2 years for regulatory compliance. The team needs to reduce storage costs while maintaining the ability to query historical data when needed. Which approach should the data engineer implement? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. OpenSearch ISM policies automate index lifecycle management across hot, ultra-warm, and cold storage tiers. Ultra-warm uses S3 backed storage that is significantly cheaper than hot storage while keeping indexes in a read-only queryable state. Cold storage further reduces costs by detaching indexes from the cluster, requiring reattachment to ultra-warm before querying. This tiered approach maintains queryability for the full 2-year retention period while progressively reducing costs as data ages. Deleting indexes and archiving to Glacier Deep Archive removes the ability to query data directly from OpenSearch, requires a complex restore process with 12-48-hour retrieval times, and violates the requirement to maintain query capability. Adding more data nodes increases costs rather than reducing them. Manual snapshots require significant operational overhead for restore operations and do not provide the automatic lifecycle management needed for ongoing compliance. Question 8. Adatum Research has an Amazon OpenSearch service domain storing application logs. The cluster has 10 TB of hot data across 30 indices. Only the most recent 7 days of logs are actively searched, while older data must be retained for 90 days for compliance. Query performance has degraded as data volume grows. Which OpenSearch feature should the data engineer implement to optimize cost and performance? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option B. Ultra-warm storage provides S3-backed warm nodes that store data at significantly lower cost than hot storage, while maintaining query capability for compliance retention. ISM policies automate the transition of indices through the hot, warm, and cold storage tiers based on age, eliminating manual index management. Together, these features keep only actively queried data on expensive hot nodes while retaining older data on cost-effective warm storage. Increasing hot data nodes addresses performance but dramatically increases costs for data that is rarely queried. Cross-cluster replication adds another full domain cost and is designed for high availability, not cost optimization. Time series data streams with rollover help manage index sizes, but do not address the core issue of storing 90 days of data on expensive hot storage. Question 9. A data engineering team needs to automatically invoke an Oz Lambda function to process CSV files whenever they are uploaded to an Amazon S3 bucket. They want the least development effort possible. Which 2 steps meet this requirement? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option D and option E. S3 event notifications natively support triggering a Lambda function directly when objects are created, requiring no extra services or custom code. Adding a suffix filter for CSV means only CSV uploads trigger the notification, eliminating the need for filtering logic inside the function. Using Event Bridge with an S3 object created. Event works but requires writing and maintaining custom filtering code within the function, adding development effort. Routing through SQS introduces an unnecessary intermediary component that increases complexity. The S3 object tagging. Event fires when tags are modified, not when new objects are uploaded. Question 10. A data engineer at Tailspin Corp is implementing AWS CloudTrail to monitor data access patterns in their AWS environment. The security team requires the ability to log all read and write operations on specific S3 buckets containing financial data, while minimizing costs for other buckets. Which CloudTrail configuration achieves this requirement? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Creating a CloudTrail trail with data events enabled specifically for the financial S3 buckets with read and write activity selectors is the correct approach. CloudTrail data events are opt-in and incur additional costs, so scoping them to only the specific buckets that require monitoring minimizes costs while providing comprehensive logging of all GetObject and PutObject operations. Management events, which are enabled by default, capture control plane operations like createBucket and PutBucket policy, but do not log individual object-level read and write operations. CloudTrail Insights detects unusual API activity patterns, but does not provide detailed per-object access logging. S3 Server Access Logging provides access logs, but does not integrate directly with CloudTrail Lake and lacks the structured event format needed for security analysis. Question 11. Adatum Pharmaceuticals needs to share anonymized clinical trial data from their Amazon Redshift provisioned cluster with 3 external research partner organizations, each in different AWS accounts. The data must remain current without creating copies, and partners should only see data relevant to their assigned therapeutic areas. Which Redshift feature combination enables this? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. Redshift data sharing enables live, read-only access to data across Redshift clusters and accounts without physically copying data. Creating separate data share objects with views filtered by therapeutic area ensures each partner sees only their relevant data. Adding partner AWS account IDs as consumers grants cross-account access to the specific data shares. This approach keeps data current in real time since consumers query the producer's live data. Redshift Spectrum queries S3 data and would require maintaining separate S3 copies, adding data management overhead. Unload exports create point-in-time snapshots that become stale immediately, not meeting the real-time requirement. Materialized views with nightly refreshes introduce a 24-hour data staleness window and still do not address cross-account access without data sharing. Question 12. A streaming services company has microservices that consume TLS encrypted data from specific Amazon MSK topics. After a new recommendation algorithm deployment, the content recommendation microservice began receiving data intended for feedback collection. Which solution ensures each microservice only accesses data from its designated topic? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Apache Kafka ACLs provide topic-level access control by defining which principals are allowed or denied specific operations, such as read, write, or describe on individual topics. By enabling ACLs and granting each microservice's identity only the read permission on its designated topic, MSK prevents any microservice from consuming data from topics it should not access, directly preventing the cross-contamination that occurred after the algorithm deployment. Security groups control network-level connectivity at the IP and port level and cannot distinguish which Kafka topic a client is attempting to access. A microservice allowed to connect to a broker can still consume any topic that lacks ACL restrictions. Modifying the partitioning key changes how messages are distributed among partitions within a topic, but does not restrict which topics a consumer can subscribe to. Kafka Connect is designed for integrating Kafka with external systems and does not enforce which topics individual microservices within the Kafka ecosystem can read. Question 13. A data engineering team at a retail company processes 500 GB of partitioned S3 data daily using AWS Glue and wants to estimate the correct number of DPUs before enabling auto-scaling. Which approach correctly estimates DPU requirements? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. AWS Glue job metrics expose real-time information about active executors, completed stages, and maximum needed executors during a job run. When the number of maximum needed executors consistently exceeds active executors, the job is under-provisioned and the maximum capacity parameter should be increased. This evidence-based approach prevents both over-provisioning and under-provisioning. Allocating maximum DPUs regardless of job complexity results in unnecessary costs without improving performance where it isn't needed. Job bookmarks track which data has already been processed to prevent reprocessing and provide no insight into compute resource utilization. Data preview allows iterative script development and testing on data samples, but cannot quantify the compute capacity needed for a full production job run. Question 14. A data engineer at Litware Corp is building a serverless data processing pipeline using AWS step functions to process millions of log files stored in Amazon S3. Each log file must be parsed by an AWS Lambda function individually. The dataset contains approximately 500,000 files, and the processing must complete within 2 hours. Which step functions configuration should the data engineer use to meet these requirements with the least operational overhead? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. A standard workflow with a distributed map state using express child executions is the correct approach for processing 500,000 files. The distributed map state supports up to 10,000 concurrent child workflow executions and can read items directly from S3, making it ideal for large-scale parallel processing. Express child executions are cost-effective for short-duration processing tasks. Inline map state is limited to 40 concurrent iterations and would exceed the 25,000 event history limit with 500,000 items. Express workflows cannot contain distributed map states as the parent workflow must be standard type. A parallel state requires predefined branches and cannot dynamically iterate over variable length datasets. Question 15. Tailspin Manufacturing runs an Amazon EMR cluster to process manufacturing quality data stored in S3. The cluster uses a mix of on-demand instances for the primary and core nodes and spot instances for task nodes. During a recent spot instance interruption, the cluster lost 40% of its processing capacity, causing job failures. The data engineer needs to improve spot instance resilience without significantly increasing costs. Which approach should the data engineer take? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Instance fleets with multiple instance types and capacity-optimized spot allocation strategy significantly improve spot instance resilience by allowing EMR to select from a diverse pool of instance types. The capacity-optimized strategy selects instances from pools with the lowest interruption probability, reducing the likelihood of simultaneous spot interruptions across the fleet. This approach maintains cost savings while improving availability. Replacing spot task nodes with on-demand would significantly increase costs, which contradicts the requirement. Running core nodes on spot instances is dangerous because core nodes store HDFS data, and spot interruptions would cause HDFS data loss. Using managed scaling with a single spot instance type provides no diversification benefit, as all instances would be subject to the same spot pool availability and interruption patterns. Question 16. A data media uses Amazon OpenSearch service to index and search log data from web applications. The cluster currently stores 90 days of data, but queries typically only access the most recent 7 days. Older data is rarely queried but must remain searchable for compliance. The data engineer needs to reduce storage costs while keeping all data accessible, which OpenSearch feature should the engineer configure. Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. OpenSearch ISM policies automate the lifecycle management of indices by transitioning them through storage tiers. UltraWarm provides S3-backed storage that is significantly cheaper than hot storage while keeping data directly queryable. Cold storage further reduces costs for rarely accessed data, though indices must be reattached to UltraWarm before querying. This approach keeps all data searchable while optimizing costs based on access patterns. Moving OpenSearch snapshots to S3 Glacier makes the data unsearchable without a full restore process, violating the requirement for data to remain searchable. Cross-cluster replication creates another full-cost cluster for older data, which increases rather than reduces costs. Index rollups aggregate data into summaries, losing the original detail, which may violate compliance requirements that mandate retention of raw log data. Question 17. Contoso Media needs to implement a change data capture (CDC) pipeline from their Amazon RDS MySQL database to both an Amazon S3 data lake and an Amazon OpenSearch service domain simultaneously. The pipeline must support multiple downstream consumers and allow independent consumption rates. Which architecture should the data engineer implement? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Using DMS CDC to stream changes to Kinesis data streams provides a durable, ordered event stream that supports multiple independent consumers. From Kinesis, separate Firehose delivery streams can deliver data to S3 and OpenSearch simultaneously, each with independent buffering and delivery configurations. This fan-out architecture allows adding new consumers without impacting the source database. Running 2 separate DMS tasks against the same source doubles the load on the MySQL transaction log and replication instance. A custom Debezium connector on eSeatWo requires managing infrastructure, patching, and monitoring with high operational overhead. Writing to S3 first and triggering Lambda for OpenSearch creates a sequential pipeline with higher latency and potential ordering issues compared to the parallel delivery from Kinesis. Question 18. Litware Research has a data lake with Apache Iceberg tables in Amazon S3, registered in the AWS Glue Data Catalog, and queried through Amazon Athena. The research team needs to update individual rows in their experiment results table when experiment parameters are corrected, and they need the ability to query historical versions of the data from up to 7 days ago. Which combination of Iceberg capabilities should the data engineer leverage? Select 2, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. Apache Iceberg tables in Athena support full DML operations, including merge into for upserts, which allows updating individual rows based on matching conditions. Iceberg's time travel capability uses snapshot-based versioning, enabling queries against historical data using as-of timestamp or version syntax without creating separate copies. S3 versioning operates at the object level and does not provide table-level time travel semantics for structured data. Glue crawlers detect schema changes, but do not maintain queryable historical versions of table data. Creating daily CTAS copies is operationally expensive, consumes additional storage, and does not provide the granular point-in-time access that Iceberg snapshots offer natively. Question 19. A video streaming company has a dataset for churn prediction containing null values, irrelevant data, and duplicates. The goal is to classify subscribers as likely to churn or likely to stay with the least operational overhead. Which solution meets these requirements? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Amazon SageMaker Canvas provides a no-code interface for data preparation and model building. Its automated data cleansing features handle null values, duplicates, and irrelevant columns through a visual interface without requiring code. The built-in two-category prediction model, which is binary classification, directly supports the churn versus stay prediction use case. Canvas manages the entire workflow from data preparation through model training and deployment without requiring ML expertise or infrastructure management. Multi-class text classification is designed for categorizing text passages into 3 or more sentiment or topic labels and is not appropriate for binary subscriber churn prediction. SageMaker Data Wrangler with Autopilot requires configuring 2 separate services, understanding AutoML parameters, and managing the handoff between preparation and training stages, adding operational complexity that Canvas eliminates. SageMaker HyperPod is designed for provisioning resilient clusters to train large foundation models and has no data cleansing capabilities relevant to tabular churn prediction. Question 20. Litware Retail uses Amazon Athena to query their data lake. The data engineering team needs to implement a partitioning strategy for a new sales transactions table partitioned by year, month, and day. The table receives approximately 100,000 new partitions per year. The team wants to minimize the latency for Athena to discover new partitions. Which approach should the team use? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Partition projection defines partition schemes directly in the Athena table properties, allowing Athena to calculate partition locations mathematically rather than querying the Glue Data Catalog GetPartition API. This eliminates the latency of partition discovery entirely and scales to millions of partitions without degradation. For date-based partitions with predictable patterns, partition projection provides the fastest partition resolution. A glue crawler running hourly introduces up to 60 minutes of latency for new partition discovery. MSCK repair table running daily introduces up to 24 hours of latency and becomes increasingly slow with large partition counts. S3 event notifications with Lambda and alter table ADD partition provides near real-time discovery, but adds operational complexity with Lambda function maintenance and can have issues with high-volume partition creation. That is the end of practice exam number 1. Review the questions you missed, then come back for the next batch.